Good morning to all of you. The President spoke to a risk-adjusted approach to easing the lockdown. We have with us today Minister Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma and Minister Patel, who will speak to the details of this risk-adjusted approach to easing the lockdown. And before I even call them, can we indicate to all South Africans that the lockdown at level 5 still stands until the end of April, until the 30th of April. So the measures that we are going to speak to now only start kicking in from the 1st of May. So we just want all our people everywhere, wherever we are, to know that the lockdown as is at the moment still stands until the 1st of May. Having said that, Minister Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, the platform is yours, Minister. Also, as the Minister comes, the slides that she will be speaking to will also be beamed to the people in our homes and everywhere we are through the various television broadcasts. We will also try to use vernacular languages where it is appropriate. Thank you very much. Minister.
Thank you very much, Minister Patel, Acting DG for Health, and all the ladies and gentlemen of the media. They can't hear me. You can't hear me. Who can't hear me? SABC can hear me. Apparently SABC can't hear me, so I have to take off the mask. Colleagues and members of the Fourth Estate and fellow South Africans, good morning. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to come and explain in more detail what the President announced, that is the country from midnight on the 1st will be going to level 4. But let me just say up front that, again, we stress that the world has never faced such an extensive pandemic since the Spanish flu. And of course, we know that the Spanish flu in South Africa, we lost more than 300,000 people, and we don't want to go there this time. And of course, pandemics do depress economies, and the depression of the economy will be probably more or the same as the Great Depression. But the Great Depression came over time. This time it's coming very quickly. And of course, South Africa was already in a weak economic position. We were downgraded, and then we have this. So it's a combination of all those things. And despite the advanced in technology, we don't have a cure or a vaccine yet for this pandemic. And so it means we have to rely on the measures that the World Health Organization has given to all of us. And if we don't stick to those, it will not help us, because now we're going to be moving to level 4. Level 4 means the lockdown is still there, but there will be a few things that will change. We should not think that when we move for level 4, it means the lockdown is gone. No. The lockdown is still there. There'll just be a few changes. But what is important is that there will be more people and more companies opening up and more people going to work. That's basically the major change. The rest, more or less, remains the same. And of course, we are taking all these measures to try and make sure that the curve of infection, the speed of the spread of infection is not high, so that the curve does not overwhelm our health services. Because if many people get infected at the same time, there'll be more people who will need hospitals at the same time, and there'll be even more people who will need hospitals and ICU beds at the same time. And if that happens, our health service will be overwhelmed and our people will not be able to get the necessary treatment that they do need. And we must bear in mind also that in this epidemic, nobody can say, I'll keep myself healthy. Our health is very interlinked. What I do may affect your own health. What you do, you may affect other people's health. So this epidemic is showing us how our lives are so interlinked. And that's why the president and the cabinet and the country has taken these aggressive interventions so that we don't get to a point where our health services are overwhelmed by the numbers that are infected and by the numbers that need hospitalization. And of course, the virus has also exposed our deep, deep fault lines in South Africa. They've exposed the issues of hunger. It has exposed poverty, unemployment, inequality. It has also exposed our special planning that we inherited from apartheid, and we haven't really changed in a critical way. So all these things contribute to how we must behave and how we must deal with this pandemic. And let me also say up front that if we move down to level 4, which we will do by Friday, and we do not stick to the conditions, to the restrictions, to the public health conditions, and the virus starts speeding up in terms of more people getting infected faster, the government will have no option but to move very swiftly back to level 5. So it doesn't mean that if we move to level 4, if we stick to all the things that need to be done, all of us collectively, then we may be able to hold on level 4 and eventually get to level 3. But if we don't, whether it's individuals, collectives, companies, because if companies also don't stick to what they are supposed to do, and the infection in a company, the company might close. And if the numbers go up, we go back to level 5. If the numbers remain stable, we may remain to level 5, and if they start showing a decline, we may go to level 3. So it's all in our hands, South Africans. Depends on what we do, whether we stick to what we are supposed to do or not. So we must make that choice ourselves. So there are things that are going to remain in place, and I want to put those up front so that we understand that it's still a lockdown, but an easier lockdown. So things like interprovincial travel will still not be allowed, except under exceptional circumstances, like people returning to work if their sector is open or their company is open, or people going to funerals under strict conditions. So interprovincial travel is still not allowed. Or people coming back to school, universities when they do open. But other than that, you remain where you are. You remain at home, except if you are going to work or you are going to buy essential goods or you are going for medical. Visiting is still not allowed. You can not visit your friends, visit your neighbors, visit your relatives. That is still not allowed. Exercise will be allowed, but under very strict conditions. Things like gyms will remain closed. Organized sport or walking or jogging is not allowed. We will put very strict regulations under which exercise can be done. So I just want to put that up front, that it's not the end of the lockdown, it's the easing, it's the risk-adjusted approach. It's not just lifting the lockdown, but because we need the economy to start working and the wheels of the industry to start grinding, we are opening, and Minister Patel will explain how this will work. But let me just show you also where I've said about this, but I think having said all this, our approach should not be that we should not feel overwhelmed by all this, but instead we approach this coronavirus as a challenge to be met by all of us collectively and not a threat to be feared. And we must meet this challenge collectively. So I would also just want to move to maybe explaining where the country is in terms of the infections. You'll see a map of South Africa with different colors and numbers. The numbers are just the districts or the metros. We've allocated every district and every metro a number, but the colors are the ones that we must watch out for. The red ones, the red spots, you can see a little red spot around Cape Town, you can see a little red spot around Nelson Mandela Bay, a little red spot around the Buffalo City Metro. You can see a red spot around eThekwini. You can see a red spot around Gauteng, especially Joburg and Ekurhuleni and a bit in Pretoria. You can see a red spot in Mangaung. Those are where the numbers are biggest. We may say those are the epicenters. So that is why we do not want, and we are still restricting interprovincial movement. Because if you move from Cape Town, where the epicenter is, or Gauteng or eThekwini, and you keep going home, which may be in the Eastern Cape or KZN or Limpopo or Northwest, every weekend you keep going, you may be taking the virus to places which do not have high numbers. And if we keep moving interprovincially, we may end up with the whole country being red, and that's not what we want. And that's why we limit the interprovincial movement. It's the same as we limited the international movement. We closed our borders because people were going in and out of other countries, were bringing the virus, or people were coming to visit us, were bringing the virus, even unknowingly, and then they tend to be positive and they spread. Now we've closed the outside borders. Now our boundaries within our provinces may act like that as well. May act like that if we keep coming to Gauteng and back, or eThekwini and back. We may be spreading the virus in areas where the virus is not so much. So we must understand that every action that you are taking, what is underlying is trying to cap the accelerated spread of the virus. So as you can see, the orange parts are also parts where the spread is there. They are second to the red spots. The yellow parts are third to the red and the orange spots. And then the blue are fourth. They are number 4 in terms of the spread of the virus. So I think that shows you exactly where we are. So the whole country is going to be level 4. But there may come a time where we would differentiate the levels. There may come a time where a particular area may be on level 5, while other areas are on level 2 or level 3, as you can see those colors. But for now, we were all on level 5 and we are all going to be on level 4. So that must guide us. So it's important then to remember that the lockdown will continue even under level 4, but it will be easier because those will be going to work. There'll be more going to work than in level 5. But because we still have the lockdown, there will even be a curfew. The curfew means when you come back from work, you stay at home. It doesn't mean that now that some may be working after work, they can go everywhere. You come back home. And we will explain, when you go to work, the sanitizers must be there at home, or washing of hands with soap all the time. When you go to work, you must sanitize. When you enter transport, sanitization is important. But when you leave your house, you must have a cloth mask. It's mandatory. It's going to be mandatory to use a cloth mask as you step out of your home, going anywhere. Now we know that these masks may not be easily available for now, but if you don't have a mask, you can use a scarf to cover your nose and mouth. You can use your T-shirt. On the health website, they also tell you how to make your own mask at home. So you'll have to have your nose and mouth covered in public. Thing that we must understand. So nobody should say, no, I couldn't get a mask. The surgical mask and the N95 and all those masks will leave for the health workers who are in the front line, and maybe people who deal with mortuaries who are also in the front line. But for all of us, a cloth mask. Homemade, bought. If you don't have, you put whatever you have. My scarf here can be a mask. So nobody should have an excuse. And I had a cloth mask, it's only because SAPC said they couldn't hear me properly, so I had to take it off. But anything that covers you protects the others. When you cough or talk, you are protecting the others, but you're also protecting yourself from their droplets. So let's do that as we go to work. Social distancing is critical at home, outside, at work. Even those companies that are going to open, they must observe all these health imperatives. If they don't, then they shouldn't open. And that's why it was said before they open, they must send a team, a small team, that's going to go there and make preparations for all this. And it's critical because industry must stick to the guidelines. Because if you take shortcuts and maybe trying to save money, you may lose more money when that company or that factory has to close because there are people who are infected. They must be screened for temperature, for cough, for any symptoms, flu-like symptoms, the symptoms that we know are related to coronavirus. And if any of the worker has those symptoms, they can't work, but they must be tested. So screening every day when people come to work is very important. For the protection of the workforce, for the protection of the people you interact with, because if you go to a supermarket, you interact with people there. So it's for everybody's protection. The masks are important. Social distancing is important. So we must just stress this. And what we want to see the whole country being blue or even further than blue. Further than blue, it will mean there is hardly any infection and life goes back to normal. But as long as we have those red spots, and remember that those red spots are where the majority of the population is. They may look small, but that's where the concentration of the economy is, in those red spots. But more than that, that's where the concentration of economic activities are. So it's a big challenge to balance, because that's where the infections are, but that's where the biggest number of the population is, and that's where most economic activities are. So it's very important that when we open up the economic activities a bit more, the strict adherence to public health instructions is adhered to. The question of gatherings, social, cultural, religious gatherings are out. Weddings, they are still out in level 4. The only exception is still the funerals. And of course at the workplace. But other than that, gatherings are still not allowed. And as I said, people can exercise under very strict conditions. And those will be put in the regulations and directions. But it will exclude any organized activity. It will exclude all the recreational facilities, gyms and all that. It's out. So we must understand that. And transport will also be there because people need to go to work. The taxis will be there because people need to work. but the health protocols must be adhered to. Masks, sanitizers, sanitizing the taxi after taking a load. And that's very important. And the 70% capacity will be kept. As the economy opens and more people go to work, the Minister of Transport will then announce the change of times and whether we are adding buses and what the conditions will be, and if the trains have to be used, that will be announced at that time, and the conditions will be announced. The transport is a supportive industry to all the economic activities, but it also can be a source of infection if we don't keep to the protocols, because people are there in bigger numbers, close. So that's why masks are mandatory, sanitization, and all that. Of course, e-hailing, as it was allowed in level 5, it's still allowed now. Private cars, but the numbers still remain as level 5. No more than 3 people in a private car. And if that has to change, it will change when the situation goes to lower levels, where we say the risk is now lower, maybe level 2, level. So for now, those 3 in a car, not more, and 70% in the taxi, e-hailing the same. So the most important thing is now to unlock a bit of the local production for local consumption and for export. That's what we are opening up the economy for. But also for purchasing of things that may be necessary for the well-being of people. So when we looked at industry, we looked at what is the risk of transmission in that sector and what measures could be taken to make sure that the risk is mitigated. We also looked at what is the impact on that sector when the economy, on the risk on that sector if it remains closed. But we also looked at the sectors in terms of their value to the economy, including its contribution to GDP, employment, export earnings, and all the value chains. But we also looked at promotion of community well-being and the livelihoods of the vulnerable. Maybe I'll explain that because it might seem strange that we also looked at promotion of community well-being. But you will recall that on level 5, we had to open up the issue of baby goods and children up to toddlers. That's part of the well-being of communities. And we know that we are going into winter now. In a few weeks or a month, the temperatures will drop and people will be cold. So children will need winter clothes. Adults will need winter clothes. So we will have to open that up, irrespective of the other 3 areas, because people do need winter clothes. Children do need winter clothes. We may need heaters. So that's how we had to look at the promotion of community well-being as well and livelihoods. Because if people don't have warm clothes and it's winter, they will easily get flu. And if you get flu and coronavirus, it's not such good news. So we'll try and make sure that we do that. And of course, the levels, when we look at the levels, when we look at the levels, we said there are 5 levels. The 5 levels, starting with number 5, that's when the economy, that's when the health is not ready, the low level of readiness, should the spread go very fast. So when we get to that, combined with the high speed or accelerated increase in infection, that's the level that we call 5, because it means the high increase with a low level of readiness or capacity in the health service creates a problem. It overwhelms the health service. Level 4, which is just slightly lower than that, is when you still have a moderate increase, but you also have moderate readiness in terms of health. So that combination is still not good, because it means that if the infection were to slightly increase, then you will get into trouble. So level 3 is when you almost are in the middle, moderate to mild, but your readiness is also mild or moderate. Level 2 is when the increase infection is low or mild, and your readiness is also not that high. Level 1 is where you have low infection and high readiness. That's where we want to be. Level 1 is where we want to be, where there is low infection and high level of readiness. Level 5, we want to move from it, because level 5 is where there is high infection and low level of readiness. So those are the levels that we're looking at. Now we're at level 4, and that's why I said to you, we can swiftly move to level 5 if the infection accelerates, because we are not at a point where we say we are at a point of high readiness everywhere. So that might, but if we keep to all the things we need to do, we might stay on level 4 and eventually go to level 3. So I've talked a lot about what we need to do in terms of employment. Where are my slides now? So we are now going to just okay, I've explained what the systems that we have used. System 1, that's how we got to the levels. So we call them alert levels. So I will not deal with that much. I've dealt with it, and the industry I've dealt with, and the health. So those are the levels, as you can see. So where we want to be really is level 1, where there is low spread and high readiness. And as I said, that when we test, the rate at which the proportion of the population is tested must increase. That's why we're increasing our testing. But it's better if those people who are tested, that the positive tests don't increase too much. The proportion of those who are tested don't increase too much. But also the rate of fixed makeshift hospitals, quarantine areas per 1,000 population. That's how we measure whether we are ready or not. And of course, the rate at which the proportion of hospital beds is being utilized for COVID is increasing. If the rate is lower, that's a better place to be. And the industry I've explained. And we are also saying, according to WHO, and also according to our own scientists, you remember when Professor Karim spoke, he said, workers, if possible to work at home at all times, whether it's level 4 or 5 or 3, if you can work at home, work at home. But if we have to bring people to work, which has to be done, those who are age 60 and above must work at home as much as possible and must remain at home. Why? Because they are the most vulnerable to this COVID. The younger you are, the less serious the COVID disease will be, even if you get infected. The younger you are, the milder it is. And maybe you will even be symptomless, which is why this problem, why coronavirus is a big problem, because there are lots of symptomless people who are walking around. Nobody knows they have the virus. They don't know they have the virus. But if they spread it to older people, the older people are most likely going to have symptoms, and they are most likely going to have more serious symptoms. And the mortality rate from 60 above increases. And of course, those who have comorbidities, that is, other diseases, whether it's diabetes, high blood pressure, asthma, cancer, other immune suppressing diseases, you have a problem, TB, lung problems. Then if you have that already and then you get COVID, then it's a serious combination. And that's why we are suggesting that those who are over 60 work at home as much as is possible and be kept at home as much as is possible. And of course, in terms of income, there should be engagement with the employers and UIF in terms of how they can be compensated. And as I said, workplace protocols, health protocols must be kept, surveillance, testing, screening must be there all the time. And even the things that we have taken for granted, biometrics, unless you are going to put your finger, clean, finger, sanitize, it might be better not to use it. Because if one person is carrying corona in their finger and they leave it on the biometric place and somebody puts their finger, they'll take it with them. And many other people will end up infected. So it's very important that we ensure that we look at all those things in detail and how they can affect health. That's why even in funerals, we've limited the number, but even limiting the number is not enough. We have to change the culture. Because if you are closing the grave and you are exchanging spades or shovels, then somebody leaves corona on that spade. Probably all those who have touched that spade might end up with it. That's why it's important to sanitize your hands, to put a mask on. Even after the funeral, we tend to have food, and we serve it in a buffet style. Then we put 1 spoon for everyone to dish. If it's rice, there's 1 spoon for all 50 of you. Now, if I'm the first one or the third one or whatever, and I have coronavirus, and I take that spoon, I dish, the next person will end up with it. So that's why sanitizing all the time is so important. Wearing a mask is so important, but also trying to do away with those practices that actually encourage the spread of the virus. In some of our cultures, when we come back from the grave, we wash hands in 1 basin. Those practices must be changed, because if we wash hands in 1 basin, we may be putting coronavirus in the basin and other people may get it. So there are so many culture change things that we'll have to address with this coronavirus. So there, we are just stressing what should happen in business in that slide. Identify the workers that are vulnerable in age and comorbidities, safe transport of the employees, screening as you enter the workplace every day, and testing those who may have symptoms, sanitizing, face masks, protective equipment, good ventilation in the workplace, even in canteens. We can't sit in the same way as we've been sitting in the canteens. We have to change, make sure there's social distancing, nothing more than less than 1.5 to 2 meters apart. So all those things are culture change practices. We have to change that, because the culture of the workplace must also change. Workers can't come and say, oh, I haven't seen you in such a long time. They hug, no. And they kiss, and that have to stop. Whether you have seen that person or not, if you want to really greet and with touching the person, you can do it with your elbow or with your feet. But we should just try to avoid. Maybe hi or something. But touching is the thing of the past. At the workplace, public place, no. So these are some of the things that we have to do. And we are suggesting that companies that have big workforce must test randomly, besides the screening of every worker as they come in. But they must also test, just to ensure that we are not sitting with a lot of symptomless people who are just quietly spreading the virus. Because if the virus spread in a workplace, that workplace needs to be shut down. So it's very important to ensure that we keep to those things. So we will be putting out regulations, and we will be giving the sectors, unions and others the document so that they can make comments but also be prepared for what is to come. Minister Patel will go and explain around the sectors. What are the things that are changing? That's the important thing, to know what is changing from 5 to 4. But I want to just also emphasize that coronavirus is a collective challenge. It's not government, it's not Department of Health, it's not individuals, it's not industry, it's collective challenge that will require shared sacrifices to achieve the impossible goal of going to level 1 and 0. Seems impossible, but it will be possible if we take this as a collective challenge. But also remember, we have to make some sacrifices. It's not punishment, it's sacrifices that we must make for our country, for our economy, for our fellow citizens. And the last reminder is also that it's not the health measures that will destroy the economy. It's the virus, the pandemic. So if we don't stick to the public health imperatives, it will be the virus, because if the virus spreads in the workplace, the place will shut down. So we mustn't think, oh, these restrictions are the ones that are destroying the economy. No, it's the pandemic itself. So we must stick to all the things that will limit the pandemic. Ngizothinjishwa ngesizulu. Njengoba umongameli ebese ememezelile ukuthi i-lockdown lesimo ebesikusona sizothi ukushintsha nje kancane, kodwa asivulwa, akusho ukuthi njengoba sizosuka ku-level yesi5 siya ku-level yesi4 sekuwalala wonke umuntu nje usezokwenza noma kanjani. Cha, akunjalo. Into ayimemezelile ukuthi sizoloku si-adjusta kancane, sibheka nje ukuthi ubungozi bungakuphi, si-adjuste kancane, silungise kancane. So kuzoba nokushintsha nje kancane kusukela ku5 kuya ku4. Kodwa ngoba isimo asikashintshe, kukhona izinto ezingezushintsha okufanele sizisho nje saqala, singaze sithi mhlambe ngolwesihlanu hawu sobe sesikhulekile nje sekuma kamachansi empunzi edlemini. Cha, kobe kungenjalo. Askezuvakashelana, sisazohlala ekhaya. Uphuma ekhaya ngoba uyapi? Uya emsebenzini. Uphuma ekhaya ngoba uya kadokotela noma uyofuna umuthi. Uphuma ekhaya ngoba uyothenga ukudla. Ubuye lokho kudla uzokupheka la ekhaya kudliwe. Akezuba nje kamachanka, asikezuhamba nje siyothenga utshwala sikhululeke. Cha, ayikezuba khona leyo nto. Asikezuhamba futhi sivakashela amaphondo, usuke eKZN uthi cha manje ngibheke eGauteng, cha manje ngibheke eKapa. Cha, ayikezukwenzeka leyo. Uhambo lizoba khona olwabasebenzi lapho inkampani zabo ezivula kabusha bezosuka la kade bekhona babuyele emsebenzini. Uhambo olingaba khona mangabe kunesimo esingasazi esingajwayelekile, noma kunesimo somncwabo. Nakhona imncwabo kusaya ihlobo eziseduze, ingane, obaba, omkhulu phela, akabi ivulelwa nje ukuthi omzala nomzala kamzala. Cha, kuseyisimo esisaqinile ngoba isimo segciwane asikashintshi kakhulu. Sishintshile sona kodwa hayi kakhulu. Abantu abazovunyelwa futhi ukuhamba yilabo mhlamba abasebenza eGauteng kodwa babe behlala eMpumalanga noma behlala eNorthwest. Labo bazovunyelwa kodwa bazofanele ukuthi babe nepermit abayitholayo. Nezingane zesikole izikole masezivulile ezifunda kwenye province kodwa zihlala kwenye zihamba zonke izinsuku nazo kuzofanele zibe nepermit. Indaba yokujima akezuyiwe ejimini, akezuyiwe emaklabhini ukuthi organize. Asikwazi nokuorganize siwomakhelwane nje ake siorganize siyogijima cha. Uzoba uk-exercise sizokusho emthethweni esowukhipha ukuthi kuzokwenzeka kanjani kodwa kuzoba strict kube limited ngoba isimo asikavu. Asikusho futhi ukuthi ukugcebeleka nje siye nje emathaveni siye emabhareni siye endaweni zokudla ema-restaurant nemicimbi noma imiphi imicimbi ehlanganisa abantu ayikavunyelwa. Nokuhlala ema-restaurant akavunyelwa. Nokuya kuphi akavunyelwa ngaphandle mawuye emsebenzini uyothenga ukudla uya esibhedlela kudokotela noma uyothenga imithi. Uk-exercise ngaphansi kwaleso simo esisoshiwe phela. Sikusho nje lokho kucace ngoba akufuneki ukuthi abantu bacabanga ukuthi hayi manje seku-right sesizokwenza noma yini. Sizokwenza ukuthi futhi makubuya emsebenzini kube nesikhathi la ungeke ukwazi ukuphuma mawusubuyile emsebenzini uye ekhaya. Shaya u8 usekhaya ngaphandle mawulaba abasebenza nasebusuku. Phinde shaya u8 kuze uyoshaya u5 ekseni usekhaya. Uyozuphume ngoba uyapi emsebenzini noma uyothenga ukudla noma uya kadokotela. Kubaluleke kakhulu lokho. Mawuphuma ekhaya mawusesekhaya kufanele njalo hlala ugeza izandla zakho ngamanzi nensipho noma ngesanitizer. Mawuphuma ekhaya awuphumi nje ngami nje. Uphuma ikhala nomlomo livaliwe. Livalwe imask yendwangu. Umuthi angazi ngizoyithola phi indwangu. iHealth kuwebsite yabo babhalile ukuthi ungazenzela kanjani eyakhe imask. Kodwa uma ungenayo leyo mask ungathatha noma yini onayo nalesikhafu nje. Ngingaphuma nje ngithi sekuyimask. Noma i-t-shirt endala sekuyimask. Ngoba kubalekile ukuthi ungaphefumuleli ungakhwehleleli ungakhulumeli amathakho aqhashele kubantu. Nabo ngokunjalo akufuneki ukuthi mabekhuluma bekhwehlela bethimula bathimulele kuwena. Siyavikelana ngoba lesifo sisho ukubambisana ukuthandana ukuzwelana ngoba engikwenzayo ngakuphilisa kodwa futhi engikwenzayo ngakubulala. Nawo okwenzayo kungangiphilisa noma kungangibulala. So lezo zimo azikashintshi futhi manje sekuqina kakhulu indaba yemask. Sekufanele ngempela wonke umuntu makusukela nje ngoLwesihlanu wonke umuntu ophuma endlini fanele aphume nemask mayiphumela ngaphandle. Yiko ke sithi noma ungenayo sebenzisa lokho nayo onako uvala ikhala uvala umlomo uphume wenzela ukuthi uvikele abanye abantu ngoba senzelani senzela ukuthi lesifo singandlondlobali ngokusheshsha ngoba masilondlobala ngokusheshsha kuba nabantu abaningi abadinga ibhedlela. Ilapho ke inkinga izoba khona ngoba ibhedlela zethu azizokwazi ukubathatha bonke. Asifuni odokotela abafike ezingeni la bese bezokhetha ukuthi ubani ofakwe emshinini ubani ongafakwa noma ngabe beyidinga bobabili noma bobathathu labo bantu. Sifuna ukuthi noma sikhuphuka lesifo sikhuphuke kancane singandlondlobali ngesivinini. Senzele ukuthi ngaso sonke isikhathi bakhona abantu abadinga isibhedlela bayithola imbhede, bayithola imshini, bakwazi ukusizakala. Enye into mhlawumbe bezwile oprofessor bekhuluma ukuthi bajabulile ngesimo sokuthi lesimo se-lockdown esingabuvumeli notshwala senza ukuthi eyibhedlela abantu abazaziyo ibhedlela zikahulumeni uLwesihlanu kuMgqibelo ngeSonto gcwele igazi, gcwele abantu abalimele, abagwazene, abadubuliwe, abarephiwe, gcwele yonke inhlobo yento. Wena ungafika ugula nje ugcina ufele esibhedlela ngoba asikho ispace. Imshini le ithathwa yilabantu nenhliziyo egwaziwe kuzanye ukuthi aphiliswe ayiswe theater ayiswe ku-ICU. So mawungaya kule ibhedlela ungacabanga ukuthi ukwenye indawo. Mawungaya eBara uye Steve Biko uye phi kule insuku nangama weekend ungacabanga ukuthi ukwenye indawo ngoba asikho leso simo kakhulu. Namaphoyisa ayasitshela ukuthi ibalo zabantu ababulewe, zabantu abadutshuliwe, abagwaziwe, abarephiwe zehle kakhulu. Siyathanda ukuthi njengoba kusenalesifo sisigcine leso simo. Sisigcine leso simo ngoba isona simo ngempela okufanele ngabe sikusona siyilizwe la kungashi ukuthi ngama weekend eyibhedlela inkinga. Kuze kusuka odokotela abaphesheya bezopractice i-emergency treatment la ngoba endaweni zabo ayikho lento ekhona la eSouth Africa. Ake sizame ukuthi ngempela singabi isizwe esidume ngokuthi siyagwazana, siyabulalana, siyarephana, senzani. Kulesimo ebesikhona zonke lezi zinto bezihlile. Siyafisa ukuthi siphinde sihlale zehlile. Yiko ke sithi ngoba sek level 4 asikwazi ukuvula yonke into. Sivula into evulwayo kahle kahle. Uvulwa isimo somnotho. Nakhona ngendlela ehlelekile, hayi ukuthi kuvele kuvulwe nje. Ngendlela ehlelekile ezokwenza ukuthi sikwazi ukubalance ukuthi isimo secorona singaqhubeki ngokusheshsha kodwa umnotho nawo ubuqala usebenza. Imboni zibe ziqala zivula. Kodwa futhi angisho ukuthi uma imboni noma thina sabahlali noma ubani uma singayithathi lemthetho esinikwa ihealth abezempilo abasitshela ukuthi kufanele sizenze, uma singayithathi sizenzela noma kanjani kungenzeka lesifo sibone inamba sezidlondlobala ngokusheshsha. Uma zidlondlobala ngokusheshsha uhulumeni ngeke angabaze ukuthi abuyele ku level 5. Manje uma uhulumeni ebuyela ku level 5 kusho ukuthi sibuyela kulesa simo sokuqala. Indawo ke ezisengcupheni la inamba zabantu abanalesifo zinkulu kakhulu ila madolobha amakhulu esithi ama-metro. Ilapho ke la inamba zikhona kakhulu. Kodwa futhi ilapho la asingakasho ukuthi we are in a state of high readiness. Esingakasho ukuthi isimo sethu sesisilungele noma isiphi isimo ngokwezempilo. Kuyazanywa njengoba nibonile kwakhiwa ama makeshift hospital nani nama quarantine, kodwa sikafike ezingeni la singathi hayi noma isifo singadlondlobala kanjani sizoba right. Ngakho ke yiko sithi akufuneki khanjwe kusuke kwenye province uye kenye, ngoba masubuyile kade uye Limpopo kade uye KZN usuzosebenza eGauteng ama weekend phela sonto akusho kufanele uN1 agcwala abantu abaye Limpopo abazobuya ngesonto, akukho lokho. N3 awukwazi ukugcwala abantu abaya eKZN nase Eastern Cape. Akufanelanga nje ama highway agcwala abantu abavakashayo ngama weekend. Masubuyile la ubuyele khona uzohlala khona koze kushiwo ukuthi sekuyavulelwa ke manje ukuhamba. So lezi zinto zibalekile kakhulu. Makiwe emsebenzini kufanele yonke into ilandelwe, ngoba uma ungayilandeli umqashi engayilandeli imithetho yezempilo izovalwa leyo ndawo. Ayizuvalwa imithetho yezempilo, izovalwa ivirus, ngoba ivirus izongena kubasebenzi kufanele kuvalwe. So kubalekile ukuthi sonke senze okufanele sikwenze ukuze umnotho uqala ukuthi abaqashi benze okufanele, thina senze okufanele. Uma senza kahle yonke into nesimo sale COVID singadlondlobali, singakwazi ukuthi siphinde kuvuleke futhi siye ku level 3. Uma ngabe singakwenzi futhi kunokwenzeka ukuthi sibuyele ku 5, usho ukuthi kusezandleni zethu empilweni ukuthi siya ku 3 masuka ku 4 noma sihlala ku 4 noma siya ku 5. Kusezandleni zethu ukuthi senzani, siyayilandela imithetho ngokufanele. Ekubaleke kakhulu lokho. Uma singakwenzi lokho sibuyela ku 5. Kodwa futhi ukubuyela ku 5 kuyingozi, ngoba kungenza ukuthi izibhedlela zethu zingakwazi ukuthatha wonke umuntu odinga usizo. Abantu abadala abaneminyaka eyamashumi ayisithupha kuyaphezulu ngokomthetho bona bekufanele bahlale ekhaya. Uma bekwazi ukusebenzela ekhaya bangasebenza, kanti wonke umuntu okwazi ukusebenza ekhaya kufanele asebenze ekhaya, uphume emsebenzini ngoba umsebenzi wakho ungakuvumeli ukuthi usebenzele ekhaya. Kodwa laba abaneminyaka eyamashumi ayisithupha kuyaphezulu, ngoba leli gciwane liba namandla kakhulu kubona. Wena osemncane, ingane encane yesikole 4-5 years, kwesinye isikhathi abazi nokuthi bayagula, kodwa likhona le gciwane. Mhlambe banomkhuhlanyana omncane ongadingi ukuthi baye kadokotela. Kodwa umuntu omdala, ugogo noma umkhulu noma umuntu onezinye izifo njengo high njengoba kuthiwa high, abanoshukela, abane-cancer, abanesifo sesifuba o asthma nezinye izifo. Uma kuqhakela icorona lapho wena unalezi zifo, isimo siba bucayi kakhulu. Ugcina udinga isibhedlela, kwesinye isikhathi ugcina ukufa kwemishini e-ICU. Manje mase bebaningi kakhulu kuzosho ukuthi abanye abezukwazi ukufinyelela kule mshini bangasizakala. So yiko sithi kufanele ngaso sonke isikhathi singasivumeli lesifo ukuthi sihambe sithi, kufanele sisivumele ukuthi sihambe kancane. Lokho ke kusezandleni zethu. Nabezempilo bayazama ukuscreena, ukutesta ukuthi ngempela sikwazi ukubhekana nalesifo. Nasemsebenzini laba abasebenza abaningi fanele bateste, kodwa wonke umuntu ufanele ascreen, kusho ukuthi ubheke ukuthi umsebenzi mayifika akanayo itemperature, akakhwehleli, akanazo nje lesimo somkhuhlane, ngoba siyafana nese corona. Ume naso kufanele test ukubonakala ukuthi unani. Lezo zimo zibalekile. Asikavakashela umakhelwane, asikavakashela ihlobo, sisaye emsebenzini sibuye. Ufuna ukugcizelela lokho. Ngoba abanye ibona ngathi bacabanga ukuthi mase kuthiwa ku level 4 awu sekushayile sekukamaqanqa cha akuzuba njalo. Lesimo esibhekene naso sinzima, umhlaba wonke ubhekene naso, kodwa uhulumeni wethu uye wathatha inyathelo eyinqala usaqala. Yiko ngathi asindlondlobali kakhulu. Kodwa njengoba sovula kancane umnotho, yiko suvula kancane senzela ukuthi singafiki lapho lasesidlondlobala kakhulu. Mina ngeke ngithi mangibuka umabona kude ngibona okwenzeka kwamanye amazwe ethi nje asenzeni konke sonke uhulumeni uthi nje asenzeni konke singakwenza ukuze singafiki kulesa simo. Yebo sona isifo sizoqhubeka, kuzoba khona abaningana bazoba naso, kuzoba khona bazoshona, kodwa asifuni ukuthi sifike kulawa amazinga esiwabona kwamanye amazwe. Ngakho ke asibambisaneni, inselelo yethu sonke, hayi kahulumeni, hayi yami ngedwa, hayi yakho wedwa, yabaqashi, yabasebenzi, yawo wonke umuntu. Inselelo ke ifuna ukuthi kubanjiswane. Inselelo ifuna ukuthi kube nediscipline. Inselelo ifuna ukuthi kube khona esithandayo kodwa singakwazi ukwenza, sikube nama sacrifices. Lama sacrifices awesikhathi esincane ukuze isikhathi esikhulu idlule lesifo siphinde sikhululeke. Siyazi futhi ukuthi lesifo sizivezile into eziningi eziyingcaki la kulelizwe lethu, indlala, ukuhlupheka, kwentuleka kwemsebenzi, zonke lezo zinto. Uhulumeni kodwa uthe khona imizamo, niyazi umongameli uyimemezele ngesonto elizayo iyochazwa kabanzi. Kodwa nje engilishiya nako ukuthi asibambisaneni, sibe nediscipline, siwavuma ama-sacrifices esikhathi esincane khona siyokhululeka isikhathi eside. Ngiyabonga.
Sibonge kuNgqongqoshe, sibonge kakhulu nakubalaleli emakhaya. Sesizawunikeza ke umunye uNgqongqoshe osozosichazela ukuthi njengoba sivula kancane, njengoba sesiya ku level yesine bese ku level yesihlanu, so sesiku level yesine ngalosihlanu lo ozayo uma kuphela le date le yange-30 lo level 5 esesekuwona. So ke sisezawucela ke ngokukhulu ukuzithoba ukuthi uMinister uPatel eze ngaphambili azosichazela ukuthi na yiwaphi lama economic activities noma sectors azokhona ukuvuleleka ku level 4. Without any further ado, again we have said to people at home, because we would like to reach everybody. We don't want to reach only those that can understand English. If it was possible, we could have spoken in every language that is an official language in our country, but we are trying the best we can. Having said that, we now call on the Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition, Minister Patel, to come and speak on the sectors that will then be allowed to operate under level 4 in a few days' time. And not tomorrow, by the way, and not after tomorrow, but in a few days' time after the after Friday, on Friday, in fact, on the 1st. The 1st is on Friday, on the 1st of May. Minister Patel, the platform is yours. We will, once you are coming with your computer, we will save you.
Thank you very much, colleague, and good afternoon to members of the media, to my colleagues, Minister Dlamini-Zuma, who's leading the work around the national disaster that has been declared, and fellow South Africans. My colleague has set out the overall framework within which the return to work arrangements will take place. To recap the key messages, we will have a risk-adjusted system that the President spoke about, consisting of 3 key elements. The first is a new alert system to measure the degree of risk from the highest being level 5 to the lowest being level 1. Second, we'll have an industrial classification system to indicate the economic activities that will commence either completely or in part, and showing South Africans how they are affected by each of the levels. And finally, a new comprehensive public health and social distancing set of measures that will apply during the period when the virus is still in our society. Now, I thought perhaps we should start by indicating that the purpose of the new approach is to calibrate the level of openness with the level of risk. If we have high risk, there are fewer economic activities and less social movement. If we have lower risk, the economy is able to expand and more movement becomes possible. And so it allows us to restart or increase as many economic activities as is possible given the level of risk. In putting the framework together for industrial classification, which I'm going to mainly speak about, we took 4 factors into account in determining what the proposals are of whether a particular factory or shop or office is able to open. The first thing we looked at is the risk of transmission of the virus, the spread of the infection that is posed by a sector or a workplace, and also the number of people who have to travel to work and the number of people who have to travel to the shop. So that is the one factor. The second factor we looked at was the expected impact on the sector of a continued full lockdown, how it affects the vulnerability of the factor, the economic impact. The third factor was the contribution and the economic linkage of every sector to the broader economy. And we took into account factors like the contribution to the GDP, the number of jobs, the multiplier effect of that sector on the broader economy, the export earnings, supply chain linkages. How does one sector that does components affect another sector that does finished goods? And we looked at industrial policy goals. The promotion of community well-being was the fourth factor. And that, of course, goes to the question of livelihoods of the most vulnerable in our society. These factors have been applied to each of the different sectors in the economy. We took some numbers, quantitative measures, as well as some judgment calls, which are qualitative factors, in these assessments. I want to recognize that it's been a difficult and complex process and a hard balancing act. Every industry, every workplace, every worker wants to return to work. We all want to get South Africa working fully. But we need to strike a careful balance between getting to work as rapidly as possible and containing the spread of the virus and saving lives. We're also striking a balance between the 4 factors that I spoke about, as they are all important. And the new arrangements that government is seeking to put into place will be based on a phased return to work. It's not everybody return to work on the same day. It will be phased in. We need to work as hard as possible, all of us, as South Africans, as companies, workers, organizations, consumers, to bring the risk level in the economy down. If we can bring the risk down below level 4, if we can get it to level 3, even more activities open. If we get it to level 2, further activities open. So the big focus must be on trying to bring the risk levels down, and we can all play a role in doing so. The return to work of increasing numbers of sectors will bring greater levels of workplace testing. So in the large companies, it will now be possible to test workers, and so we'll get more reliable, more comprehensive information that we feed into our national system, and that allows us to say, in this particular area, we are now confident that the risk levels are low, and we can in fact move that area to a lower level of risk and more activities can open. So that's the critical thing we're trying to do. We also want to use the phased approach for another reason, and that is to enable firms themselves to get the workplaces ready for a period of COVID. The experts tell us that we need to brace ourselves, we need to prepare ourselves that over the next 6-8 months, the virus is still going to be very active in society. And so we can't simply get back to work as if the virus is not spreading. The workplaces themselves have to be changed, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. The focus principally in this phase, level 4, that will commence on the 1st of May, it's International Labour Day, is about restarting core parts of the economy. We're considering a more measured reopening of more retail in order to continue the limit on movement in the society. As has been said, the virus doesn't move. People move. When many people move, the virus moves rapidly and spreads very quickly. In moving from level 5, which is the highest level of the lockdown, this is where we are now, to level 4, we need to strike a careful balance. If we move too fast, we risk a rapid rise in infection, and we will find ourselves with many ill people, many more deaths, and we have to return immediately to level 5, which is detrimental to the economy itself in the long term, in addition to the fact that we would lose people whose lives otherwise could be saved. If we move too slow, we prolong the economic downturn, and we risk that parts of the economy will not be able to continue. We know that, we recognize that. It's real. So we must move forward, but we must do so with a degree of caution, or as the President has put it, in a risk-adjusted manner. The proposal that we will be putting to sectors today follows discussion that we had with businesses, with firms, with organizations of individual firms, but also with the trade union movement. We've listened to comments by many citizens, by comments that we've seen on social media, and we've taken that into account. The current essential service activities that operate under level 5 is already extensive. They cover many sectors already. All of energy and water, sanitation, and telecommunication infrastructure is currently at work. So too is the health sector, food production, healthcare products, and hygiene products, as well as critical public sectors. Most of financial sectors are currently at work. Parts of retail, of mining, of manufacturing, of construction, of communications, parts of the media, some call centers, and parts of the public sector are at work. They will continue to operate when we shift to level 4. But we will be adding additional economic activities to that list. With a change in the lockdown from level 5 to level 4, as we move to that level, we estimate that it will enable more than 1.5 million South Africans to leave their home and go back into the workplace. That's roughly the additional number that we expect. The exact number, of course, will depend on many factors, on how many firms reopen, on the final arrangements involving sectors like education and so on. And it will be based on a framework that we're still developing for different sectors. Now, if we look at the economy as a whole, if we add these roughly 1.5 million persons to those who are already working at the moment, it means more than 4 out of 10 workers in the economy will, in phased ways, be back at work. That's just over 40%, depending on the final list of sectors and activities and the final schedules for education. We will, of course, release a firmer estimate once the final list of reopened sectors has been completed, following the processes that Minister Dlamini-Zuma has outlined. I want to turn to the new activities that is proposed for reopening. In agriculture, forestry and fishing, that whole sector will begin to reopen, because that now will include logging and forestry, as well as horticulture, the transport of livestock and animal auctions, of course under clear social distancing directions that will be issued. In manufacturing, there will be a further partial opening of the sectors. The sectors will not be open 100% during level 4, because we need to give firms an opportunity for a phased return to work. We need to begin to test the systems at factory gates, at work areas, in the canteens, in bathrooms, in the screening of workers, in transport, in arrangements for those who have the symptoms of COVID-19. And of course, also to progressively increase the number of people who are on the road moving to work and moving from work. As a broad baseline, 20% of all manufacturing workers will begin to restart during level 4, but some subsectors of manufacturing will have a higher number of workers, a higher proportion of workers who will be able to return progressively to work. Still not to 100%, but to more than 20%. They include the following sectors: children's clothing and winter clothing. We know how important it is for families to be able to get warm clothing. Part of fighting the virus is to avoid the cold. Blanket manufacturing for a very similar reason, and other bedding and computers and mobile phones, so that we can enable more people to work from home. Some car manufacturing and the components that goes into cars. Some manufacturing of cement and other construction material, as well as hardware, because as construction starts, they will need the stocks of these basic raw materials that are required. And of course, stationary production, because we've got to begin to get ready for the return of workers to factories where they'll need stationery, and down the line also the arrangements involving higher education and schooling in general. So that covers manufacturing. If we look at the shops, and they are the retail stores, the wholesale stores, some additional opening of retail will take place in level 4. We recognize that shops are a big vector of transmission. When you go to the shop, there are greater opportunities, because you mix with so many people, for the virus to spread. So we really want to appeal that visits to the shops be as infrequent as possible, only go when it's really necessary, and keep it as short as possible, and we have to maintain social distance and adequate sanitation arrangement in the various shops. When I'm talking of retail, I'm of course not only talking of the large supermarkets. We also mean here the reference to informal trading and to spaza shops. The categories of retail sales that will be expanded include children's clothing, winter goods like winter clothes, blankets and heaters, stationery and educational books, tobacco products, and personal ICT equipment. Those are things like computers and mobile phones and other home office equipment. I move next to mining. Mining has already begun the process of workers returning to work. They do so in batches because of the large numbers involved. Not all workers in mining can go back at the same time. And my colleague, Minister Mantashe, has already outlined how that process will work. In level 4, the new addition is that those workers who work in open cast mining, in other words, not underground, they will be able to go back in larger numbers, again in phases, but returning in the period from the current 50%, eventually in phases to 100%. Services will also increase. From some professional services that will be required by firms that now open, so if a car factory opens in part, they may need people who do professional services, engineering services, accounting services, legal services, and so on. So those services will follow the opening of the economy in level 4. But it also includes other key services. And I can draw attention to call centers will now have an expanded number of activities that take place. Recycling sectors will also reopen, including informal recyclers. Construction will have expanded activities. Previously, it was really critical maintenance and construction works. It will now be expanded to include civil engineering for public work projects, and these include water, energy, and sanitation projects. And we also will be bringing road and bridge projects in during level 4, so that in rural areas we can begin to attend to the importance of building new roads, maintaining roads. As regards restaurants and other places serving food, restaurants and takeaways as well as other similar places will be open for delivery only. And that delivery means that the customer don't come to the shop or the takeaways, but the food goes to the customer. Because the experience all over the world has been that that is a better way of limiting the movement of people. So you won't be able to visit a restaurant to sit down or to fetch your food, but you can phone, you can make some other arrangement, do online, and ensure that you are able to tap into the food that's available. It's an opportunity to create a food delivery network in townships as well. Now, we've pulled out a few key areas. We will share a detailed document with all the proposed sectors and what changes between level 5 and level 4 with the sectors concerned. So we'll be sending that today still to business organizations, to trade unions, to sector organizations, and a copy of that will be available to members of the media at the end of the briefing today. We will also produce a simple graphic that will show in very clear ways what is envisaged in level 4. What are the activities that will reopen? What are the social activities that we as South Africans now will be able to engage in, so that it's clear and it's something that we can all have an equal understanding of it. So what we've outlined today and what the document, the more detailed document, will show is a phasing in of more parts of the productive economy. But we are having to look at all of this through the spectacles of health to make sure that the level of infection is not spread significantly, that we don't get a huge pressure on our healthcare system with large numbers of people getting into the healthcare system. We're going to do whatever is possible to try to limit that. The phased reopening of the economy is also an opportunity to support South African made products, to buy local, because we've had a significant knock on our economy. There's no question about it. COVID-19 has hurt the economy. It's hurt jobs. It's hurt firms, small businesses, township enterprises, larger companies. They've all been hurt. When we as South Africans go back to the shops and we buy locally made goods, we bring demand back into our economy and we help the economy slowly to recover. We're seeking to enable a greater level of working from home and to facilitate access to computing. So you'll see in the detailed arrangements that it really is facilitating a shift in many sectors to a more digital form of communication. As I indicated earlier, we're particularly focusing on primary sectors like agriculture and mining, forestry and so on, because they provide the input into manufacturing and they are the start of most value chains in our economy. The phased introduction is a good opportunity for workers and managers to work together at the workplace, to get the workplace ready for COVID. So it means as smaller numbers initially come in, we can stress test the system, we can pilot it, we can see what works, what doesn't work, and make the adjustment. We will be talking, as Minister Dlamini-Zuma indicated, to businesses. Over the weekend, they will all have access to the documentation and they can provide us with their feedback and their comment. And we're going to work closely with businesses to ensure that the risk-adjusted approach can be introduced at workplace level. And that means the Department of Health, Minister Mkhize will be playing a key role to ensure that we have the right measures in place at workplace level to support a COVID-resistant work environment, or one where we take every reasonable step to limit the spread of the virus. There's a role for sectors to develop partnerships with us in how we can bring the risk level in the economy as a whole down, and we can then see how can we move more rapidly to level 3 if we can get the rate of infection down and we can get the rate of testing up. We're also looking at partnerships with the private sector to strengthen healthcare facilities. The more healthcare facilities we have, the stronger those healthcare facilities are, the lower the level of risk in our society. The new arrangement will increase reliance on new ways of doing things, new partnerships. It will strengthen the digital economy, and we recognize there are still many things in the South African economy that require physical delivery, that people need to be physically in a factory to make something. So we want to work together as in partnership with workers, with firms, with everybody really, to get a level of risk down so that we can as rapidly as possible get to level 3. But we must always do so recognizing that human life is vital, is important, and that we must calibrate, we must adjust the level of activity with the level of risk. So that sets out the broad framework. As we've indicated, members of the media will be getting more detailed documents. They're quite detailed, and they will be the basis of discussions, reflection. There will be feedback that we will get, no doubt, from particular sectors who will perhaps give us some good ideas on how we can implement the new framework in a manner that will further reduce risk. And we will use that opportunity also to clarify some of the arrangements that would have to be in place at particular workplaces to ensure that we lower the risk levels. So to my colleague, Minister Mthembu, that sets out in broad terms the new approach that the President spoke about, that Minister Dlamini-Zuma provided the framework for, and this gives a little bit of the detail. A document will be circulated to the sectors and trade unions involved. We'll be getting feedback. We'll be taking all of that into account. And in the course of next week, having taken into account the feedback that we've received, the intention then is to publish this document, to gazette it together with the regulations that would then apply, particularly in respect of level 4, so that everybody knows for level 4 what is expected. So the feedback we're seeking in the next period is particularly around level 4 to enable us to move swiftly with as few challenges and difficulties between level 5 and level 4. So thank you for the opportunity just to outline the approach on the industrial sectors.
Thank you very much, Minister Patel and Minister Dlamini-Zuma. I think to the people at home, Abasemakhaya, the document, the very detailed document, is what we are going to upload, both on our own government website as well as the coronavirus website after this. But also we are putting out that document as a way of showing the various sectors of industry what our thinking is and what, therefore, they can also put their views on the thinking of government. So it's also consulting with the various sectors of industry on our thinking around this risk-adjusted approach. That's why we have not had the full document, because we were going to sit here probably for how many days or weeks if we had the full document. So, but indeed, all South Africans will have sight, as the Minister has said, of the full document immediately after this. We have outlined the broad principles that underpin the easing of economic activity under level 4, still of the lockdown, because the lockdown will continue, but we'll have various levels. We are now at level 5. We are now proposing indeed a level 4, that all of us become level 4 under level 4 lockdown. We'll then have a level 3. That would be good if all of us work together, as Nkosazana has said, and we all move from level 4 to level 3 of lockdown. And again, we all work together to move from level 3 to level 2. And we all work together to move from level 2 of lockdown to a normal level, which is level 1. That's where all of us would like to be, where all sectors of the industry will be open, where all types of gathering will be allowed. That's where we'd like to be, at level 1. But for now, we are proposing a level 4 easing of the lockdown that we are in now. Having said that, we will now open to questions and any issues of clarity. We will start with those that are calling in. Can we have the first caller?
On the line, we have Aseri from Capital Life. Hello, Aseri.
Hello.
Aseri, you are most welcome. Can we hear you? Can we hear your question?
Go ahead, Aseri.
Yes, my name is Aseri from Capital Live. I just want to quickly ask Minister Dlamini here. With Minister Siyakuva uthi most businesses will be opened and workers can go to work, especially those that are called now to come back to work, and there are those school kids or those that are going to universities that might be going back to the university. What about the early childhood development? What is going to happen with the kids when the parents and the brothers and sisters went to school? Is the early childhood development having any plan, or what is the way forward there? Thank you.
Perhaps we should also assist colleagues to say that there will be various, particularly the education sector, will be speaking on when are they likely to open schools and how will they open schools, including issues of universities. We will have that briefing on Monday so that we assist colleagues here to answer things that they might not know anything about. We know that the schools and the universities, the ministers that are responsible for that area of work, will be coming to explain the approach to opening of schools and universities on Monday in the afternoon. Let's have another, but of course, some parts of your question will still remain and be answered. The next question from the online service.
Minister, the next caller is Benson from Pongola FM. Benson, go ahead.
Kuluma Benson from Pongola.
Yes, Minister. How are you? How are you doing?
So far, what can you say? Can you proceed with your question, Benson? we can't be as good as we can be under the circumstances.
Okay, thank you, Leader. I'd like to greet the ministers there. Mr. Patel and Nkosazana. It's not a question, but I'd love to say what you did, what the President announced on his address, these 5 stages that we implemented. Kuhle. Siyabonga, siyancoma, futhi ingathi ngaqhubeka, kodwa nje the cigarette on the cigarette side, Minister, ngathi ngavala uduku, ungaphinde nje ube khona ugwayi, ngoba still if somebody smokes, uzobhemela eduze kwakho and then uzothola lowo mkhuhlane whatever, mhlawumbe he's got that virus and then uyathola nawe ngogwayi awubhemayo. It's only that, Minister. Keep it up.
Siyabonga, Benson. Let's take there was another caller.
Minister, on another line we have Bonga from Ikora Indonsakusa Community Radio. Bonga?
Bonga?
Hello?
We are. Bonga, your question or comment, please.
Umbuzo wami mfishane nje ubheke kuNgqongqoshe umhlonishwa udokotela uDlamini.
Usonqamukile ke baba. We will come.
Bese umbuzo wami manje ngithi ukuthi ngakube icabinet ibhekisile yini imithelela emibi engase ibe khona uma kuvula ugwayi, ngoba ugwayi nje uwodwa ungahlanganiswe necorona uvele uhlala ifika empilweni. Lokho nje kuphela umbuzo wami kumhlonishwa uNgqongqoshe.
Thank you very much, Ugwayi. We will now take questions that are on our other system, our WhatsApp system. Nangeba?
Thank you, Minister. The first question...
Can we hear you properly, please?
Yes. Am I audible now?
Yep.
Yes. Thank you. The first question is from Anton Swartz from ARD German TV. And his question is, with the relaxing of the lockdown restrictions and the phased introduction of industry, will the repurposing of technology be part of the short to medium term strategy? And he's specifically looking at examples of clothing industry making face masks, and specifically at the diverting of space age technology from SKA and CSIR engineers to the NVP program. The next question is from Geoff Hill, The Washington Times, and he's asking, unlike other countries, SA seems not to have published stats on ethnicity among the cases and the deaths of corona in the country. When can we expect that?
What can you report that? Publishing of ethnicity?
publishing of stats on ethnicity among both the cases and the deaths of coronavirus in the country. When can we expect that? That's the question.
Oh.
The next question is from James Stent from Ground Up. He's asking, many countries have included relief for mortgage holders and renters during lockdown periods. Why has the government decided against this kind of relief measures?
Can I just assist colleagues? We will have another press briefing on Tuesday, to be exact, at 2 o'clock. That's when we'll be dealing with the relief measures that have been announced by the President to the tune of 500 billion rands. We will let that question stand over until Tuesday. Next.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. Vickersberger from Netwerk 24 is asking, please provide details on regulations affecting exercise and walking of your dog. Under what circumstances will these activities be allowed? The next question is from Miriam Issa from Finweek.
How many questions have you given us now? We just want to give you 5.
Yes, this is the 5th one, Minister.
Okay.
All right. Miriam Issa from Finweek is asking, can you please tell us what proportion of those infected become seriously ill? In many other countries, 20% of people need hospitalization. How many of those infected have been hospitalized?
Okay. Well, we do have the acting DG of Health. If he wants to respond to that question, we will give him an opportunity. But let's start with the issue that has brought us here, the easing, the risk-adjusted approach to easing of the lockdown at level 5, because lockdown will continue, as we have said. Who wants to start, colleagues? Minister Dlamini-Zuma, do you want to start? No. They are not all. We will come to the next set. We will come to the next set. We didn't want to take too many, lest all of us be confused.
Okay, thanks. I think on the first one, the Ministers of Education will come on stream maybe next week to explain the different phases and which grade and who will come to school when, and eventually they will also clarify on the issue of the younger kids who may not necessarily be at school. But in level 4, as it was in level 1, we did cater for care of the people who are ill, people who are mentally ill, people with disability, and children, and the elderly. So that will continue also on 4, that those people, you are allowed to get somebody to assist, to care for them, or people who work in those places that care for that category of people will also be allowed. And social work services also for those categories will also be allowed, and people in distress, counseling, so the whole range of areas that will be open for people to get assistance. On the issue of cigarettes, we welcome your comments. I think they are helpful because sometimes we don't know what people think, and I think it's very helpful to hear what people think about the opening of cigarettes. We will take that back to Cabinet and hear what they say. Repurposing of industry, my colleague will expand on that. But yes, of course, I think COVID-19, though it is a serious challenge but we must also use it as an opportunity to restructure our economy, to introduce new technologies, to repurpose some of the industries. So I think he'll expand, but generally, as a general rule, yes. And I think it has also assisted us to some extent to move into areas that we were tentative into moving to. Like now, many people don't meet because there are no gatherings allowed, but we do meet virtually. And that is something that we should have done actually some time back, but we didn't. But COVID-19 has just catapulted us into those areas. So I think there'll be lots of silver linings that will come from this dark cloud of COVID-19. The regulations will be published on Thursday, which will be before Friday, about under which conditions you can exercise. So those will be published then, but as I said, it will be under very strict conditions because we actually still under lockdown. We're discouraging to see people in the streets. So there'll be no organized walking, no organized jogging, no organized sporting. There'll be no going to the gym. And as the president himself said, exercise will be under very strict conditions. So those conditions will be spelled out in the regulations. The issue of mortgages, I think you have said it will be expanded on next week by the relevant ministers. The issue of the proportion of those who are ill and maybe the breakdown of statistics, we are happy that we have been working very closely with the health department, and even now the acting DG of Health is here. Maybe he can assist us on those questions, but Minister Patel may expand on some. Thank you.
Minister Patel, those that you can take, I hope you can Zoom. Are you able to Zoom to the Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition? Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you very much. The question that I specifically am going to be answering is the question from Anton Swartz, and it's about the repurposing of local production to deal with the challenge of COVID-19. And yes, as my colleague has said, there are lots of opportunities. We have a significant industrial base, we have know-how, and we can use this to help us fight the spread of the virus. Let me use the example of masks. We are now working with a number of companies that have the sophisticated technologies to be able to make the masks that are used by healthcare workers. They're called N95 masks, and they need to be kept and preserved for the healthcare workers that are the front line of the fight against COVID. They are in wards and hospitals where large numbers of people are or will be coming who are infected. So we've got to ramp up local production of that. But we're also making and encouraging the making of cloth masks. I've been wearing this cloth mask that has been made by a small firm. And large companies as well as smaller businesses, particularly smaller businesses, can have this as an opportunity. So in discussion with the clothing industry, in which of course there are many small businesses, we are able to get a ramp up of cloth face masks that we'll all be wearing in public in future. And in fact, the Minister of Small Business Development has also been doing some excellent work to try to stimulate the growth of activities in the clothing industry to help. Members of the media will see that one of the products that will be added in level 4 are the textiles that are used for the manufacture of face masks, so that people can get access to it and make it. Some of the face masks can even be made at home, and indeed the National Department of Health has already issued guidelines on its website of how you can make your own face mask and wear it, covering the nose and mouth when we are out in public areas. So that's on the one end of the technology spectrum. On the other end of the technology spectrum are ventilators. COVID-19 attacks the respiratory tract. And so very often people who are infected have difficulty breathing. And there's a range of supports that they need. From the time you're at your house, when you are fetched, you may need an ambu bag, which gives you the first line of support when you have difficulty breathing. You get to the hospital, you may need what is called a nasal cannula that allows oxygen to get into your system. As some patients' position deteriorates, you may need what is called a CPAP, which goes over the face. And eventually for those who still don't recover in that period, it may require more invasive ventilators. So we've been working through a project called the National Ventilator Project to bring together all the local efforts. And government's strategy consists of three elements. The first element is when we can get ventilators that are required for their healthcare system anywhere in the world, we want to buy them. So we're out there looking for where ventilators are available. But of course, everybody wants the ventilators right now. So there's an enormous global shortage of ventilators. So the second element of our work is to stimulate the production and manufacturing of ventilators using global prototypes where it is available. We take the technologies that have been developed elsewhere and we encourage local manufacturers using those specifications to make ventilators here. The third element is to use South African know-how and ingenuity. And of course, we are a country with enormous history of innovation on many areas. Many viewers may not know, but for those who watch the series on television called Grey's Anatomy, there's a big scanning machine, a full-body scanning machine on Grey's Anatomy. It's a very sophisticated machine. That machine was designed in South Africa, invented in South Africa, manufactured in South Africa, and it's sold all over the world. So we're bringing the technology and technical know-how of a team of very capable scientists and technologists working on something called the Square Kilometre Array. And they being put to use now to take all the ideas that are coming from different innovators and inventors and manufacturers in South Africa, put it through a stress testing exercise, see what are the most promising technologies, give it some incubation and other support, and we hope that over the next number of weeks we'll be able to complete this process. We'll make a more formal announcement at that point, and we hope thereafter that we can start in production so that before the peak of COVID-19 in South Africa affects our population, we would begin to have produced ventilators here using South African technologies and know-how, South African workers, and our scientific base. So yes, we are using the opportunity, and we're doing it both because we can't find these ventilators elsewhere in the world, but also it's an opportunity to create jobs and to create industrial output for South Africa. And very importantly, we have a responsibility to the rest of the African continent. Everywhere on the continent there is a shortage of ventilators. And so we need to produce on scale both for ourselves, for the South African market, but also for neighbors, because we're in this together. We want to be able to ensure that we as Africans, our continent, is able to survive this very, very difficult period, and that we come out with as little damage to the health systems and with as little loss of lives of our people, and of course with as little damage to our economy. So that is how, Anton, we're using the innovative capabilities. One big motor company, Ford, is already producing face shields that you can see will be worn by an increasing number of frontline staff that basically shields the face, but you can still see through the transparent perspex. And so we're using the strength of our component manufacturing capabilities in South Africa to rise to the challenge of producing goods that our country needs, that our people need. Thank you.
DG of Health.
Good afternoon, Honourable Ministers and fellow South Africans. Yes, on the two questions, the first relating to the... I wanted to show them our cloth mask. On the question of the data, we currently provide data on age as well as provincial distribution. There has been no specific trend relating to ethnicity, so we've not published ethnicity data. Suffice to say that currently the trend suggests that about 3% of people that are tested are positive, and that's been about the trend that we've seen since the time of the first case, which is way lower than what the global experience has been, which has been much higher, around 10%. Relating to the serious infections, globally about 5% of people actually have serious infection, meaning that they need to be in ICU and high care. In South Africa, this number seems to be much lower currently, below 3% in most cases, and we're anticipating that we would be able to keep it at this level, but we are aware that globally this number is much higher, around 5 to 6% of people actually go into ICU and require ventilation, and our plans are largely linked to those numbers. Thank you.
Perhaps just to add on what the acting DG has said, the responsibility of the government of South Africa is the well-being of all people within South Africa. Everyone, immaterial of their ethnicity, immaterial of their background, immaterial of their color. This disease doesn't know color. This infection doesn't know whether you are poor, whether you are rich. It doesn't know whether you are black, whether you are white, whether you are Zulu, whether you are Sotho. It doesn't know those boundaries. And therefore, our responsibility as the government is for all people of our country to be safe. That's why we're taking these measures. That's why we have all these levels that we have pronounced, because our responsibility is to all people of our country. We will then get to the next set of questions. I know that we have got 3 from our online facility. Can we start with the first one?
Thank you, Minister. The first caller is John Fraser from ZA Confidential. John?
John, you are allowed.
Hi. Yeah, I'm John Fraser from ZA Confidential. A couple of questions to Minister Patel, please. First of all, what's happening with the export of non-essential goods? Can these travel freely to the ports and airports? And how are they being policed? And secondly, a question on wine. What's the latest on being able to transport wine for export? And what's the latest on retail, please?
Well, I hope Mr. Patel would like to answer that question, but I would have said to him he will answer it when he comes in his capacity as the Minister of Trade and Industry next week, Tuesday. Next week, Tuesday, we'll have a sectoral approach where we will deal with all questions related to matters of the economy, etc., and inclusive of the measures that the President has put in place. But if he wants to answer the question, I leave that to him, but he still has an opportunity to do so next week. Next question online.
The next question is from Max from Pondo News. Max?
Max, we are listening.
We are listening.
Well, we are not hearing anything there. I know that there is a third caller. Can we get to the third caller? Okay. Can we get to our WhatsApp friends?
Thank you, Minister.
But can we hear you properly?
I'll try my rally voice.
Yes, that's much better.
Okay, thank you. Hajra from Power FM is asking, is there a threshold or indicator of what will be assessed for us to move between levels, or will this be done on a weekly or on a monthly basis, for an example? The next question is from Vickers from Netwerk 24. Will certain parts of the country remain under level 5? If so, which parts of the country? The next question is from Nathan from Ground Up. Is there a reason for continuing to allow lotto tickets to be considered an essential good and therefore sold at stores during the lockdown? Zwandile Mbeje from the SABC is asking, what happens to people who are outside of the province whose company is now opening, and whose company is now opening and they went to a different province during the lockdown or before the lockdown?
Just ask him whether he was listening. Just ask him that question.
We don't want to censor questions, Minister. We'll ask all questions we receive. There's a question from Sophie Mukwena at the SABC. She's asking, the medical team from Cuba is expected to arrive in South Africa tomorrow. Can we please have more information on the numbers and how they will be deployed? And then there's a question regarding the sale of cigarettes, and she's asking, what is the reaction to the decision to lift the ban against the sale of cigarettes?
Thank you very much. I don't know who wants to start, but Minister Dlamini-Zuma.
Thank you very much. On the first question, moving between levels, as we said, it will depend on whether the spread on the numbers in terms of the spread of the disease, and also on the proportion of people tested and those who test positive. It will also depend on the state of readiness or the capacity of the health system to cope with many infections. It will also depend on how we do on this level. If on this level things deteriorate, then we may have to move to the previous level 5. But if on this level things improve, then it means again the same system will be used to open up more companies, open the economy a bit more. As I said at the beginning, a time may come where other parts of the country, as you saw, we've now mapped out the country according to districts, and we are looking at the data according to districts and metros to see what's going on there. So there may come a time where there would be differentiated levels. Others may be higher, others lower, depending on what's going on there. So for now, the President announced level 4 for the entire country, but there may come a time where there would be differentiation. And we will be looking at the data on a weekly basis. But if there are no dramatic changes on the data on a weekly basis, then we can't change from one level to the other. But over time, if we see that the trends are moving towards us moving to a lower level, then we'll move to a lower level. If the trends show that there is trouble, then we'll move to a higher level. I can't tell at the moment that we would be moving after so long. It will depend on the data itself. So I want to just say that, and we will be advising the country, as Minister Mkhize, Health Department, and other ministers have been talking to the country. We will continue communicating, and the public will know whether we are doing well, whether we are stable at level 4, or whether we're going up, or whether we're going down. In fact, that takes care of the two questions.
2 questions, yeah.
Lotto is not an essential good, but even though it was being sold, to be honest. But maybe Minister will know what the answer is.
Are you able to answer Lotto?
And let me just finish.
Okay.
People who went outside before the lockdown, we know that the national roads were very busy in that 72 hours that the president gave us. And people wanted to be locked down in various provinces. There will be an opportunity for them if their workplaces are opening. So they will be given permission by their employers if their workplace is opening and they need to come back. So they will be able to come back to the various other provinces. But what will not be allowed is for them to commute on weekends. Go home, come back, go home, come back. They'll come back once and they'll stay where they've come back to work until further notice. And that will be very strict, let me say, because if we allow that, I said at the beginning that the major economic hubs are also the major epicenters for the disease. And therefore, and they are the biggest number of population is in those centers. Now, if we allow them to come back and then to go in and out, there will be a big danger of them taking the disease to the areas that have got lower numbers and then increasing the numbers there. So they must know that they will come back to where they work, but they will not be able to go to the other provinces on weekends. I think unless the DG of Health wants to answer it now, otherwise when the Cubans come, the announcement will be made tomorrow of where they are going and how many they are and all that. I think I've tried to accept the load.
Minister Patel.
Thank you very much. On the 2 questions that were put to me, the one by John Fraser, though we're going to cover some of the detail next week, I'll just briefly reply to those. On the we should distinguish between where we are now, which is level 5, and what is proposed for level 4, which will not yet come into effect until the 1st of May. So currently, on export of non-essential goods, that is not part of what is permitted. So essential goods, of course, can be exported. In level 4, there will be more goods that are now manufactured in South Africa. And so an increasing number of those goods will also reach export markets. At the moment, in level 5, we have only the production of essential goods. As regards the ports, a regulation was passed that enables all the goods, all the export goods that in level 5 were already at the port at the time of the lockdown, that those goods could be exported, they could be cleared at the ports and put onto ships, so that we clear the ports for our essential goods that need to come in and go out. On the question of wine retail, the proposal that the sectors will see that is being distributed does not entail the retail of wine in any form during level 4. I want to add the one important issue regarding the movement of cargo. At the moment, essential goods can go through any of the land borders to neighboring countries. We are proposing, and we'll be looking for feedback on it, but we're proposing that in level 4, goods that come from elsewhere in the world via a South African port, whether it's Durban Harbour or OR Tambo, and that is intended to go to neighboring countries, can then be re-exported to neighboring countries, even if they're not classified as essential goods in South Africa. But that would only be for immediate re-export from the harbour or the airport in sealed containers and so on through to neighboring countries. That is the proposal for level 4. It's not currently the arrangement. Then Nathan raised the question of the lotto tickets. I should just indicate that many of the questions that are coming up in the briefings are about wine, cigarettes, and gambling. But on the lotto tickets, the rules are absolutely clear. Lotto tickets are not an essential product. They're not in the regulations as an essential product, and so lotto tickets are not able to be sold. They should not be sold at the moment. It was brought to my attention yesterday that there were claims that they were being sold, and I had asked my officials to make it very clear to the National Lotteries Commission that they need to issue a statement clarifying that lotto tickets are not permitted in this period. I think that covers the areas it was.
Did you any question about? I think the doctors from Cuba, it will be explained when they arrive by the Minister of Health. Is that correct? Thank you very much. So there is no other issue that was meant for you, isn't it? Thank you very much. That will be our last round of questions. Do you have any? None. Do you have some?
I have many, Minister.
Okay. When we have many, I think let's take what we can. We can then direct others. But others, if they are of the sort that I've answered, we can answer them, but in the next briefings that we are going to have. We'll be having many briefings to the media out there. We're having briefing of the HSRC tomorrow. Monday, we're having a briefing of the education sector. Tuesday, we're having a briefing of the social and economic sector. So even if we have not answered your question now, indeed we have other avenues and opportunities to answer your question. But can you take a few?
All right. Is 5 okay?
Let's take 5.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Vickers from Netwerk 24 is asking, where and when will the sale of liquor be allowed? When will hairstyles and beauticians be allowed to operate? Under which level is that? Charlotte from EWN is asking, 1, the President referenced a devaluation of some responsibilities to provinces. districts and municipalities to determine their own lockdown levels. When do you envisage this happening and under what conditions? Secondly, with regards to exercise, what will the strict conditions be? And lastly, what oversight will there be in terms of government and labor and the Department of Labor with regards to companies reopening and specifically checking what they have implemented, that they have implemented the measures they need to in order to be allowed to reopen? Then there's a question from Mshengu from the Sunday Times. He's asking, is allowing the sale of cigarettes during level 4 of the lockdown not an antithesis of what government is trying to do given the effects of smoking on the respiratory system? What scientific evidence and risk analysis was relied upon to conclude that it's logical to open the sale of cigarettes during a respiratory virus wreaking havoc all over the world? Then the next question is from Olivia Kamwendo from Reuters News Agency. For companies and sectors which will be allowed to reopen, will there be restrictions of how many people can be allowed at work at a time? And the fifth question is from Jill from CCTV. She's asking, what happens to people who are due to retirement or relocation, who are in one province but need to go to another? And the examples of that is a new job or a new home. This affects business recruitment, removal companies, rental agreements, personal travel, etc.
Since we have not received any from the online, if you allow me, colleagues, can we take another 3? Then we are done. From the long list that she has.
Can I propose that the first 5 be answered, then we'll take the last 3?
Oh, why don't we finish? How many do you have there?
There are so many.
You can't even count. I didn't know that I'm a media person who can't count. Okay. Okay. Maybe let's just take another 5, then we are done.
Okay. If I can just have a second. Okay, there's a question from Heidi Jokos from ENCA, and she's asking what happens, and this is with regards to traveling in between provinces, what happens if a person who needs to travel doesn't have a license or needs to be dropped off? Can they be dropped off to go back to work as of today, as they're expected to return to work on Monday? Then there's a question from Marianne. I think that this was answered. Is asking, when will the regulations be available, and when will the ministers be issuing directives as per all the announcements that have been made? Can I continue?
Yep.
Okay.
Let's take 5. That will be the last 5, because it will be 10 when we add the other 5.
Okay.
Those of us who did simple mathematics or arithmetic.
Okay. Anton from Pretoria FM is asking, online shopping and e-commerce encourages social distancing. When will you open up the e-commerce industry? Do you believe there's a risk of spreading the virus through delivery of packages? Sihle Mlambo from IOL is asking a clarity-seeking question. In terms of the sale of cigarettes, is it a universal lifting of the ban on all lockdown levels?
That's the last one.
Was that the last one?
And the one that you are coming to.
Okay. Charlotte Kilburn from EWN is asking, please would you put numbers or matrix to high and moderate with regards to how the levels are determined, e.g. at an average daily increase of 30% in cases, would we would consider it moderate or high? So basically she's asking at what level of the daily increases of infections would determine the movement of the levels. Thank you, Minister.
Okay. That will be the last lot that we are taking. We will still have other opportunities where we will speak to colleagues, but the questions that are remaining there, as we always do, we will direct them to the relevant authorities and relevant ministers so that they are answered. You have said that there are many. It means that you can't count them. So we will send the many questions to the relevant ministers. Colleagues, Minister.
Thank you very much. I think on the issue of liquor will not be allowed on level 4 as far as level 4 is concerned. Considerations will be done as we move down the levels, but for now, it's not allowed. At the moment, there is a national state of disaster. And the president has announced level 4 nationally. But I did say there will come a time when there may be differentiations of levels in different districts. But for now, the level of disaster, the state of disaster is national. So the law does not, for now, allow that every district can now decide, I'm doing this in the district, because the state of disaster is the national state of disaster. When there is a need to declare a state of disaster in a district, then districts can decide. But for now, it's the national state of disaster. But let me hasten to say there are regular discussions between the provinces and the national through what is called the Presidential Coordinating Committee, the PCC. We've had 2 meetings already, virtually, and we do meet also with district mayors virtually, and we have had meetings even with all the mayors virtually. So the discussions are happening, and COCTA, being the cooperative governance, coordinates those discussions, and the president, we are the secretariat, when it's the president and the premiers and other MECs. So it doesn't mean that because it's a national state of disaster, the national is just working on its own. We're working with all the 3 levels, but we are not at a stage where each level can decide on their own what they do, which industries they open, and what public health restrictions they lift. No, we're not there yet. So as I said earlier, I think the strict conditions under which exercise will be done will be published in the regulations. But as I've already alluded, the gyms won't be opened because they've shown to be a source of spread. Organized exercise of any sort won't be allowed. But we will put it under the regulations. What are those strict conditions under which you can exercise? The oversight on the reopening of industry, yes, there'll be oversight, but I will leave it to Minister Patel to deal with it a bit more. But we are already working, Minister of Health, Minister of Labor, obviously, but also sectors, Minister of Minerals and Energy in the mines and different sectors that are opening. There will be obviously strict oversight, but the unions also are part of the discussions, and they will also be part of that oversight, but Minister Patel will deal with it. The cigarette issue, I did say that we are listening Yes, the President announced the issue of cigarettes. We are hearing you, your arguments, and we will take it back and see what happens after those discussions. While listening, government, we have listened to you, and I think the other people who wanted smoking also have been speaking, but we are hearing. We'll take the matter back, and I will discuss it and see what comes out of it. But it's interesting that indeed quite a lot of questions have come up around the cigarette issue, understandably so. Then the movement of people. If you are taking up a new job, or if you are coming to your old job, it's the same. You will be given permission to move, to come to your new job, or to come to your old job. But what will not be allowed, whether you are taking up a new job or an old job, is when you have moved to an area of high infection, is to move up and down. That will not be allowed. If you have finished your job, you are retiring, and you have to move to another province, your company will say so, that you need to move in as much as it will save if you are taking up a new job or coming to your old job. They will say that you are moving, and if it's not urgent for you to move straight, it's fine. If it's urgent, it's exceptional circumstances. They will be weighed on an individual basis. There's no rule that said all retired people can go back or whatever. It will come under exceptional circumstances. It will be examined, and obviously if there's merit in it, it will be allowed. But generally, interprovincial movement is not allowed, except when you come back to your job, old or new, and you are not allowed to go up and down after you've come back until further notice. The issue of cigarettes, saying, is it being lifted forever? For all levels. Level 5 does not have cigarettes. So it's not like we're saying now whether the infection goes high and we have more restrictions but cigarettes are exempted. No, they're not. It's on level 4 that the President said there is a consideration that they might be lifted. So I will just leave it at that. But also there is a counter comments that do not want cigarettes to be allowed. So let me leave it at that for now. For Minister Patel.
Minister.
Thank you very much. I think there were two specific questions that I'd like to comment on. The first is the one by Olivia from Reuters on the restriction on the number of workers at workplaces. So in the document that has been distributed to members of the media now and that will be available publicly, what is envisaged is that a number of measures will be introduced, and we're looking for feedback on these measures to ensure that we have a safer environment at work. The first of these measures is social distance in the workplace itself, where the general standard of 1.5 meters between workers with as few contact points and measures to avoid shared areas, shared surfaces, shared machines, and so on. So the critical thing here is that 1.5 meter social distance may itself have an impact on numbers. The second thing is that even where in level 4 companies return to work, it won't be all the workers in the level. It will be phased in, and in a number of cases there are some upper limits that the new framework introduces, and that is to enable in that first phase for companies to have a smaller workforce and get the workplace COVID ready, see what the challenges are. And I want to highlight the work that businesses would be doing. Many businesses have already started to do so, but from the point where workers come to the factory gate or to the office block, in many cases, as my colleague has indicated, there are various types of biometrics, fingerprint scanners, there are perhaps in some cases arrangements where workers congregate in large numbers when they enter a small confined workplace gate. So companies will be looking at how to make those more COVID friendly in the sense of reducing level of contact between people. Once you go past the entrance, and of course when you get to the entrance, there would also have to be screening arrangements, and screening involves two key things. One is temperature. So if it's above 37.5 degree, 38, so the regulations will set out the detail. Once it's above the level in the regulations, then those workers would need to be relieved of responsibility to work and be sent for quarantine, testing, and so on. The other part of it, of course, is to check if people have the symptoms normally associated with COVID. So there will be some questions asked. So all of this require that people be trained and that systems be put in place. Finally, in addition to the upper limits and the phasing, we're also strongly encouraging companies to enable working from home arrangements, wherever it is possible for someone to productively carry out the responsibilities they have from home during this period. It would be helpful because it limits movement and it limits the opportunity for the spread of the virus. There will also be some proposed measures in the documentation on particularly vulnerable persons. Those are people over 60 and people with comorbidities, in other words, those with pre-existing illnesses that are particularly vulnerable to exposure to COVID, and particularly where you have COVID and you have one of these illnesses, the level of fatality tends to be higher. So to try to work cooperatively with businesses to facilitate all of this. These are our people. We need to save lives. We need to make sure that an older generation is not lost, is not wiped out in the middle of this pandemic. And so we really have to work with each other in achieving this. On the sector arrangements, as again Minister Dlamini-Zuma indicated, we'll be looking at a number of ways to ensure that the new arrangements are put in place. The most important thing is really to get buy-in and strong cooperation between workers and managers. So they need to work together to do so. We also need to get firms to embrace the spirit of this. If we fail in limiting the spread of the virus and large numbers of people are infected, then unavoidably everybody goes back to level 5 and it's more restrictions. If we succeed and we can contain the virus, we can increase the testing levels, we can enhance their healthcare facilities, including what companies can do. And there's one big automaker in the Eastern Cape, for example, that's working with the provincial government now to expand public hospitals, to go in there with their maintenance teams, clean up the hospital, improve it so that it's ready for a greater number of COVID patients to come through it. When we do those things, we help to move the level down, and then more people can enter. But there's also a job for union representatives who are at the workplace, or shop stewards, There can be cooperation arrangements with bargaining councils, with sector business organizations and other federal structures of business organizations. So we are going to be looking at many different ways of reinforcing this message and working together. Some sectors have already begun to draft sector plans where they work together as a sector to ensure that whatever the new arrangements are that are finally gazetted, that those are introduced in a responsible way in each workplace. Moving next to Anton from Pretoria FM's question on online shopping, I want to make the point that more products will now be able to be ordered online as a result of the fact that more products are now capable of being sold in retail. We have in the documentation that the framework that has been put out to the public today, we've included there not only stores, but we've also included e-commerce, we've included spaza shops and informal traders, so that they're all able to move those goods to final consumers. Of course, as we, in the regulations that will be published next week, more details will be put in there. On e-commerce and online shopping in particular, I should point out that hot meals will now be able to be ordered online and delivered to people. So those of us who have been missing our favorite hot meals would be able to obtain it in those ways, because we're trying to get people to stay at home, those who don't need to go to work, as part of this arrangement, to stay at home, because it's about saving lives. At the same time, I should also indicate, if we open up any one category, let's say e-commerce, unavoidably there's enormous pressure to do the same for physical stores, for spaza shops, for informal traders, so that there's a fair competition platform. And when we have all the other parts of retailing also selling that, then of course you have huge numbers of people moving in the society. So we need to make sure that we have a system in place that has wide society support, that ensures we don't now multiply and increase dramatically the number of places that sell things to the point where effectively the virus spreads. We have large numbers of people dying. We have coffins all over the show. There were graphic pictures in Italy of army trucks being used to move coffins around because all the normal services were overwhelmed and huge numbers of people had died. More than 50,000 Americans have died to date in this pandemic. So it's real. And the fact that we've not had huge numbers of deaths in South Africa is something that should not make us complacent. It's really important that we keep the systems and the arrangements in place, and that we do everything possible, humanly possible, to save lives. At the same time, we've recognized the importance of opening of the economy. So we're trying to link these two to ensure that we go for the greatest level of opening within a framework that is set by health considerations. As we get better information, more information, higher levels of testing, we're able to refine the system in the manner that had been indicated. And so this is an important moment when we are looking for comments, and we are going to be able to take into account those comments before the regulations are issued and before the final framework is gazetted. So part of it is also today here, and as my colleague has said, even some of the questions the media has asked, for example in cigarettes and so on, are quite useful and a helpful feedback to us about the kind of issues we must take into account in the final list that will be gazetted. My colleague may also want to add on that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I think your feedback is very important. But I just also want to comment on the question of e-commerce. I think my colleague has commented commented on it, but just on the issue whether there isn't a danger of spreading it through the packages. I think, yes, there is a real danger. So it means that when you receive a package, you have to take the necessary precautions. Sanitize, clean the package before you even open it. But when you have opened it, also sanitize what's inside, because you don't know who was touching it and what are the dangers. But then sanitize your hands as well after all that. So it means if we getting more things delivered, then we have to take extra precautions, because I may leave a package in front of your door and I may have the virus. And so we need to just make sure that we do take those precautions, which you must take even when you do shopping, actually. When you come back with shopping, you must take precautions. So I just wanted to add that to the answer that my colleague has given. But lastly, to just stress again that this is in our hands, all of us, collectively and individually. It is in our hands. If we want to go to level 3 and down to the lower levels until we get back to normal, we must all take our responsibility, individually and severally, as citizens, as governments and all institutions, business, companies, informal traders. All of us in this country have a collective challenge, and we have to make the relevant sacrifices so that we can move quickly to normal life, back to normal life. But if we don't, if we think, well, it won't affect me, it will affect somebody else, making a big mistake. And even if you think, oh, I can protect myself, but I don't care about the next person, making a big mistake. This is one time where our life is so interlinked, where our lives, our well-being is, we are united in looking after our well-being as a country and as the world. So it's all in our hands. You wear a mask when you leave your home. You must wear a mask when you leave your home to the public. Whether you made it yourself, whether you bought it, whether it's your scarf, but you must wear a mask. You must wash your hands. You must social distance at all times. Whether you're in a shop, whether you're at work, whether you're at home, social distancing is very important. And sticking to the rules. Don't do like the others who want to beat the system all the time. You're not beating the system, you're putting yourself, your family, and other people in danger. I mean, we've heard stories of people who carry empty coffins and say they are going to a funeral, they are taking the body to another province, only to find that the coffin is empty.
Yeah.
You're trying to beat the system, but you may be taking a virus with you to another, to your family, to your community, or you may be bringing a virus, the virus back to, or giving it to the other people that you are trying to beat the system with. This is not the time to try and beat the system. This is the time to work together, because everything that's being said or done is not punishment, is not against anyone, but is for our collective good, and it's for our collective responsibility. So if we take that spirit, we will be able to move from level 4 to level 3. If we don't take that spirit, we might have to go back to level 5 or even stricter measures in level 5. So in a way, it's all in our hands. It's in the hands of government, it's in the hands of individual citizens, it's in the hands of business, employers, workers. It's all in our hands. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did you?
Thank you, Minister. Just a couple of the questions. The first one around hairstylists. To say all those services where there is direct contact, there's obviously a serious risk of transmission. So hairstylists, massagers, hair and nails, as well as those that are beauticians, etc. There's very close contact and personal contact with each other. And so the risk of transmission is much higher. So clearly those services are prohibited for that reason, and I think for the benefit of both those that are benefiting from the service and those delivering it as well. I think on the question about what are the criteria and how will we make those decisions, I think it's important to bear in mind that there are probably 4 areas that we're looking at. In looking at them, the outcome is not a formula-based outcome. So the things we look at is firstly, what are the number of tests that are done in a particular district? Of those that have been tested, what is the positivity rate? What is the trend around that? What is the health capacity in terms of the number of beds that are available, both the general and ICU beds? And then of those beds, how many are currently occupied by COVID patients? So those are the elements that we look at largely, but the outcome is not a formula. So in other words, we don't take those numbers and add them up and make a decision as to what level we fall into. There are a number of other factors that need to be taken into account before we make that decision. I think the Minister of Health, then taking the advice of the Ministerial Advisory Committee, will then advise us to what level he thinks we should be at. On the workplace, I just want to emphasize the points that Minister Patel has made. We will be publishing a guideline on how the workplace needs to be managed in terms of COVID prevention. Just to emphasize the point that masks need to be used in the workplace. There needs to be sanitizers, or at least running water together with soap, so that the employees can wash their hands regularly. It's also important that there is random regular testing. There is a significant proportion of employees who may be asymptomatic, and so randomly testing them is important. Also those employees, as Minister Patel mentioned, that have comorbidity. So if you have a cardiovascular disease, it's important that you reconsider whether you want to go into work or negotiate with the employer. Similarly, with respiratory diseases such as asthma, COPD, chronic bronchitis, etc., or even some of the immune suppressive conditions such as HIV, TB, diabetes, or if you're on chemotherapy, these obviously pose a significant risk, and our experience from the other countries suggests that the mortality in this group is very high. So we really encourage you to rather remain at home rather than going and putting yourself at risk. Those were the key questions, Minister. The last point I wanted to just mention was I think it's important for us to take lessons from other countries that have dealt with this outbreak. And I was listening to one of the South Africans who were in Wuhan, and she was asked the question, what advice can you give South Africa? And her point was very important. She said, one of the differences between China and South Africa is that in China, when somebody breaks the rules, your neighbor will tell you, these are the rules, please don't break them, because it affects not only you, it affects all of us. And I think as a society in South Africa, when we see somebody breaking the rules, let's encourage them to comply so that all of us as a society can make sure that we move along to level 3 and level 2 rather than having to move up to level 5. Thank you.
Maybe before Minister Mthembu, I've got an SMS here. The person is saying we must also talk about, he's adding to this issue of not allowing cigarettes. He's saying there's something called SCAFE, where you smoke.
Oh, SCAFE.
Yes, and pass it on to the
yes,
other.
SCAFE, my brother.
And he's saying when you allow cigarettes, then the spread of the virus can go quickly around this issue of SCAFE. And he's also saying that abantu abamnyama abaphuza usogam abawenze emakhaya bawuthela ukhambeni bese bewuphuza kanje balandele baphuzisane. Uyasikhumbuza ukuthi naleyo nqubo inkinga izosihlupha kulesifo ngoba uzophuza umuntu kanti unaso lesifo asihlulisele kwabanye kanjalo. Kodwa ke phela kufanele ukuthi sikhumbuzane kanjalo, kodwa futhi abantu abahlala ekhaya bangavakashelani bayophuzisana inkambo. Le SCAFE asibhekisisa asibuyisele emuva siyoyikhuluma le ndaba kaGwayi. Ngiyabonga.
Thank you. Minister Patel, those are your closing remarks.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the feedback that we've had, and as Minister Dlamini-Zuma began to engage on the issue of cigarettes, it illustrates the value of public consultation. And we recognize that within the constraints of time, because we have to move rapidly, but we must have a process of public consultation, that we need to hear the voices of South Africans on this matter. Absolutely critical. So while we will be talking to sectors, we also will be monitoring the conversations where we can on social media. We'll be getting feedback from citizens. They'll be talking to members of parliament, their political parties. They'll be talking directly to us via the representations that they will be making and the information that they're sharing with us. And this process of public consultation acts as a means of dampening special interest lobbies that try to put one point of view across. Ultimately, we need to make sure that we act in the broader interest, and we can only do so by being open-minded and hearing the concerns that are coming, and of course taking the advice of the health and the medical experts. One critical issue that we're looking at is whether the extent of the opening is too fast, whether the kind of phasing we are introducing is appropriate, because I want to really underline what my colleague has said, what Minister Dlamini-Zuma has said today repeatedly, and that is it's a risk-based approach that we're adopting, where if we don't proceed cautiously, if we do a rushed return to work, a firm will benefit. A firm will benefit for a few weeks. Production restarts. But that firm will potentially suffer losses for a very long time, for many, many years, when many workers in that firm test COVID positive. And for those who die or pass away, the loss is permanent. To their families, they would be losing a breadwinner, a permanent source of income. And so we've got to move. Yes, we want to open the economy. It's very important. At the same time, we need to make sure that the pace we do it in, the speed we do it in, the manner in which we phase it in does not result in a significant spread of the virus. We've looked at the experience globally, and countries that opened too quickly had an enormous spread of the virus, and they're now starting to close again. And so there is no textbook anywhere in the world. The best thing is to listen to the medical experts. We've been following this, to listen to the advice of the World Health Organization in these matters, to get feedback from our own people, and to work together at workplace, firm, sector level, in society to contain this. This is not about a government regulation or a government policy. This is about us as a country closing ranks and working together to limit the damage of a virus that we all confronted with. And as was put so eloquently by Minister Mthembu, it's a virus that knows no color, no class. It is deadly. It has taken enormous numbers of lives elsewhere in the world. And the new framework that we're putting out for consultation with the public, that we're putting out for consultation with businesses, with the trade union movement and others, is an attempt to get feedback on whether we've got the balance right in these things. Thank you very much.
Since your last words.
Thank you very much. I just want to say, South Africans, let's do what we can to protect one another and to make sure that we can go back to work, those who are going back to work slowly, but also carefully and safely, so that we can just move progressively to the lower levels. Thank you.
We have been here, colleagues, from we started at around 11:10. We are now at 14:10 almost, for very good reasons. For very, very good reasons. Those who have access to the coronavirus worldometer will know that we are all in the entire world. We are almost now at 3 million people who are infected. But people who have died are almost 200,000. Just people who have died. One country that we will not mention has over 52,000 people who have died. One country. There is another one that has over 25,000 people who have died. South Africans, we have 79 of our own who have lost their lives. As we ease the levels of the lockdown, going to level 4, what my colleagues have said is what matters the most. Wherever we are, whether in the work environment, do we practice those hygiene strategies and guidelines that we have been given ever since we heard about this? Social distancing. It's now called physical distancing. 1.5 meters to 2 meters, even at the workplace. That's what we are saying. Even at the workplace, we must screen those that will be opening their firms, if we all agree, ultimately, because this is a consultative process. We are consulting with the public. This is the view of government, that we must come to a level 4, but have some measure of economic activity being streamed in. But even those that we are streaming in must screen their people. Those that have a bigger number of employees must even test their people. Sectors like your mining sectors, etc., etc. So we must live with this even in the workplace. We must still ensure that we don't touch one another. We don't kiss one another. Because as we all know, this disease and this infection only gets to another person through another person. Therefore, if people are not mixing, we read something yesterday on Daily Dispatch of Eastern Cape that said in one village there's now 40 people who were infected because they attended a funeral. This is real. So what we are talking about here is real. As a country, as we speak now, we are standing at people who have been infected, who are standing at 4,220 as of yesterday. Indeed, the figure might be higher today. But like my colleague said, South Africans, Bobaba na Mama, it is up to us. Bosisi na bobhuti. Uma nje silandela lezi nqubo uhulumeni ayibekile, sibambisana ngazo ukuthi singabi ndawonye sibe baningi, ukuthi singenza amapati, ukuthi singaye emajimini singawavuni la amajimi asikawavulanga, nokuthi futhi singayi emashebhini, singayi ukuyophuza, even sibambisane ngezikali, uphuza izikali, sinikezana ngembamba o noma ngomuphi utshwala basemakhaya. Uma senza konke lokho, singakwenzi konke lokho okwenza ukuthi hlangane nale gciwane impela sizolunqoba lesi sifo sizolunqoba le gciwane uma olesibambisene. And again we end ngamagama ashiwo Nkosazana kuthi noma ikuphi okwenzayo uyobe ungakwenzeli wena, you'll be doing it for all of us. But if you also mess up, you are messing up for all of us, unfortunately. You might then be responsible through your actions for whatever that will happen to another South African. Nkosazana.
Sorry, sengicina nje sorry
ukucela. No problem.
Ukuthi ngithole enye SMS ebuye Swazini.
Oh,
Swatini uthi in Swaziland when the Kumbi users were forced to wear masks, they borrowed each other their masks. The conductors asked them as they were alighting to leave the mask behind for the next group of people.
Hallelujah.
So kufuneka sizibheke zonke lezi zinto. I think into ebalekile le ukuthi kungashi ukuthi hayi mase wehla shi imask yakho so inika omunye. Imask yakho eyakho ebusuku uyayiwasha. Awiniki omunye umuntu. Ama mask awabolekanisi. Uyayiwasha uphinde uyigqoke. Ukuthi uzoyikhipha ekhaleni lakho emlonyeni wakho inika omunye umuntu kuyinkinga enkulu leyo. Ngoba mawunegciwane usho ukuthi seligcwele
impela
mase ngikunika sengiyakunikeza igciwane noma nawe unginike yakho usuyanginika igciwane balekile. That's why ngithi asingazama ukubitha isystem, asizama ukwenza okufanele ngoba lokho babekwenza kwakukuzama ukubitha isystem bolakana ngama mask kodwa lokho kuzokwenza ukuthi igciwane libhebhetheke. So let's not give somebody else your mask. Your mask is your mask. The end of the day you wash it, you can't wait tomorrow without having washed it. Thank you.
Impela sesikhulumile sikhuluma into eyodwa nje ukuthi asibambisaneni asibe muntu munye ekulwisaneni nalesifo nalegciwane singa bolisana ngokubambana ngezandla futhi siqhelelane 1.5 meter to 2 meters ngisho nasemsebenzini kanti futhi nawe ungazibambi ungakagezanga izandla uzibambe kufanele ugeze njalo izandla noma usanitize ngoba uma uzibamba ungakagezanga izandla kanti ubukuyobamba izinto ezithize ngoba le gciwane liyakwazi ukuhlala ngisho nasestofini liyakwazi ukuhlala ngisho naku desk yakho. So ke kufanele njalo nje nawe ugeze izandla noma usanitize ukuze ungathathi le gciwane ulisuse entweni ethize uzi infecte wena. So sibonga kakhulu ke kubantu baseNingizimu Afrika ukuthi la nisilalele namuhla kunale document lomqulu esewukhiphayo ke namuhla oyakuwo wonke umuntu sewukhona awusesewufakile lomqulu abadinga ukuthola uyatholakala ku website ye coronavirus www.coronavirus website kanti futhi ukhona futhi naku website ye GCIS ungangena namanje uthole lomqulu sizafana kuwo wonke futhi amanye ama website akhona kuhulumeni so that kungabi nomuntu ozoba nengxaki ukuthola lomqulu kahulumeni okhuluma ukuthi na uma sikhuluma nge-level 4 lockdown sikhuluma ngani siya consulta ke kanjalo sibonga kakhulu ke kuba bonke abaye bashaya ingcingo ukuthi na bezwe babeke imibuzo yabo. Thank you very much to the journalists that we are working with and everybody else, particularly to the people at home. Let's continue saving lives. Let's continue staying at home because that's the only way of saving lives. This virus can only move if we move. The only people, after all of us are agreed on level 4, that will be able to move are those whose various sectors and workplaces would have opened. And they will only have a responsibility to only go to work and come back and go nowhere else. Because Umama Kulmel also on a curfew, where after coming from work, you are expected to stay at home. So that message of staying at home will still continue, because it's only through staying at home that we save lives. And as we see what's happening throughout the world, it's quite clear that we have done our best as a nation. We have done our best as a nation. Let's not lower our guards now. Let's not lower our guards now. Thank you, South Africa. Sibonge Wabasekhaya, and thank you very much for all those at home who have been listening to this broadcast. Thank you very much. Go to our website, familiarize yourself with the document that we have just put to the public now. Thank you, and thank you very much, Sevlen. My colleagues, thank you very much.